Hello everybody, welcome to G4G here on YouTube. I am your host, Napalm Don, trying to make a video that doesn't go 30 or 40 minutes long, because it's a potentially long-winded topic to talk about. And that, as you can see from the title of the video, is that Felmyst, a TBC cap server that had just come out after 4 years of development. On this hand, 4 years. And on this hand, 5. 4 years for 5 hours. Blizzard shut this down in that. Damn. Alright, so poor Gummy. This guy is... he has a disability that has him disabled. I don't know if he works or what his disability is, but it's been said that he's disabled, and this has been a labor of love for 4 years. But it becomes so ridiculously well known before its release, thanks to the precedence, Nostalgia set, which then was Elysium, so on and so forth, that it lasted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and then was shut down. Now, here's something that I haven't seen discussed yet in the discussions about this. I wonder if Blizzard sent any staff in there to register and play just to see the kind of volume the server would do and just see how many people would actually register and play, using Felmyst as a test to be like, wow, holy shit, 1 million people were online in those 5 hours. Maybe we should really do a TBC or vanilla server. It's certainly a possibility, because it's like, hey, we want to do this risky project. Since you're doing it, I'm going to Trojan horse in on your shit and see what it's like. This way we know the risk or reward of us doing it without us having to do it. So, I think that would be an interesting thought, and nobody's thought of that yet. But so, yeah, Blizzard shut down Felmyst in 5 hours. Can you imagine, like, you gotta feel bad for this guy. Imagine if you saved up your earnings for 4 years to buy a car, drove it for like 5 hours of road time on it, and then it's parked somewhere and a semi just comes and pancakes it. You'd be like, are you fucking kidding? So, yeah, you gotta feel bad about that. Now, in this video, my topic is not whether or not people can or can't do private servers, the legality of it, the IP, you know, the intellectual property protection, and all of that kind of stuff, and what's against law, what you could get away with, is it old code, new code, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into that, because that is definitely a 20-page topic. What I want to get into is the fact that, can you go back again? You know, there was a Stephen King story, sometimes they come back again. And there is a WoW quote of, a Blizzard dev quote of, you think you want a locked expansion pack server. Really, you don't. That's where my discussion is on this one. Can you go back again? And who are the types of people that can and can't go back to these servers for whatever reason? So, one of the groups that I think can go back to these servers is the people who quit WoW prior to Wrath. So here's how I kind of categorize WoW's eras. Vanilla and TBC is one era. And I think of those two expansion, well, Vanilla and the first expansion, TBC, as being very, very similar products. And I think they go together. Wrath comes out, changes things sweepingly so much that Wrath and Kata, to me, go together. And then Mop, Warlords, and Legion go together. With Warlords and Legion really going together, Mop kind of being a bridge from that middle segment, but still I put it more with WoD and Legion than I do with like Kata and Wrath. So you have the group of people who left after TBC or in Wrath and were like, man, this game went to total shit with Wrath. Wrath babies, you know, tanking, threat, no crowd control, no attunements, blah, 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 blah. Or they made it to Kata. Oh, hi. They made it to Kata, and they're like, well, now we have these, like, shit compressed talent trees and everything, and like, you know, I like the old, more Diablo-style trees, and trees like Rift that were just really, you know, robust and involved, and, you know, there was so much flair, like, you could go, you know, like my druid, for example, my druid, for example, went a little bit down the Boomkin tree to pick up some things over there, and then he goes a little bit down the Resto tree for the improved mark. But not everybody did improve mark if they were, at the time it was called feral, so feral was kitty and bear. You only had 3 trees. But like some warlocks did the improved imp and the like improved hellstone, but some didn't because they had other things in mind for that spec. You know, people could be like, those are the things that I want to relive. And if we're talking about TBC, we're talking about those ridiculous attunements that existed in TBC, like the Karazhan attunements and attuning for Hyjal through the Kalthus and a Lady Vosh vials, the vials of eternity. Here on my druid, Hand of Adal. So my druid is the one who earned that title, and he was using it before the account-wide stuff went into play. And, you know, Hand of Adal is something you can't get anymore. My hunter has a transmog of Rakdalar that he earned in vanilla with all those fucking demons. The Angora one, the Winterspring one, you know, getting the leaf, the sinew, and Felwood with the quest-giving trees and all that shit. And that is an absolute source of pride for me, and it gets comments, and people are like, wow, you know, nice transmog, that's Rakdalar, and, you know, you see priests walking around with benediction, and, you know, you could have people like, I missed that stuff, what it was like to get that, and, you know, I want to go back to that. I left when Wrath babies started because Wrath was so fucking easy. So that's one group of people that I can see very easily going back. Another group of people are people who have unfinished business in those places. People who are like, you know, I never got to complete my Rock and Lock, or I had just rolled a warrior when vanilla rolled into Cataclysm and I never finished him, so I never got to do the stance quest or go back in time to do the shaman totem quest or the druid form quests, like that really, really, really deep part of the ocean you had to swim to near Brill for your seal form or something like that. And, you know, people who maybe have unfinished business that they want to attend to that they can't now because the world has moved on, to quote the Dark Tower. The other set of people that I believe would want a server like that are the significant others, the friends, the family, the loved ones, the good friends of people who have experienced vanilla WoW and TBC WoW, and I constantly hear like, man, back in my day we used to have a position in groups called the main puller. We used to have the hunter have to pull our mobs to us, and then feign death near the tank so that the tanks could start tanking, and warlocks could pull threat, and feral druids could pull threat. So, you know, your tank had to be good and shit. And, you know, like, you had to promote somebody in your raid to be a main puller, and it was a big deal. Like, we had invited this one girl in our guild up to the officer level just because she was our main puller at the time, and when she was going to be on vacation moving for like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that, we had to train another main puller. And you had the one person who had your resistance gear. If they weren't going to make a raid, you had to make a backup person. So, I mean, there's the people who hear those stories and are like, man, I started in Cata. I wish I could go back and experience that. I don't know what the old Barrens looks like or old Desolus looks like before it became a verdant pit of green. And they want to experience those things in a way that they can't anymore. Because, again, to quote the Dark Tower, the world has moved on. Yeah, those are the people who are going to want to do it too. For the people who are thinking about going back but have done it before, like myself, allow me to make an analogy to you. Going back to Vanilla WoW and TBC is like trying to go back and relive losing your virginity. Every time you get a new partner and you have the first time with that person, there is, of course, some degree of this is new and cool and exciting and everything like that. But it never takes the place of the first time, provided the first time was good. I'm sure that's not the case for everybody, but it doesn't compare to that very first time with the very first person. And no matter what you do, even if you have droughts or with somebody for such a long time, or even that virginity taker, and now it's the first time you're out doing something different again, you still can't go back and fully have the impact of that first time. I can't go back to a vanilla server and change the impact of coming out of Mulgore into the Barrens and seeing thunder lizards for the first time and being like, holy shit, look at the zone, look at these mobs. What do I do with this crossroads? No pun intended. Am I going left, north, down, south? Like, where am I going? Nothing can take away my first time of going from Stone Talon into Desolus, coming up that like little hill and seeing this, you know, beige-ishy brown world that I knew give way to this gray shit nothingness. And seeing those vultures and the Kodo graveyard, and then the shocking difference it was to go from there into Felmyst, the verdant, the green, you know. Or going into Org for the first time and hearing who, ha, and the Org music swelling, or the Baron's music swelling for the first time, or coming out of Brill and being an undead and going to that border of the Plague Lands by the Bulwark and looking out and seeing those like level 50 something spiders in there and being like, oh, holy shit, don't run. Or over in the Eastern Kingdoms, so in the beta, I was playing an Alliance, and, God, what zone was that? So, what lands? Loch Modan, okay. So being in Loch Modan and going into that border with the Badlands, and seeing those giant, you know, well, not giant, but those wild cats prowling around, and having them aggro you from across the zone because you're so new and noobish, and those things are like, oh, fresh meat, and them hauling ass after you. You can't get that back, and you can't get that impact that it had ever again. I was at my server's AQ gates opening up, and I remember that amazing shit fest that it was with all the lag there and people spamming spells and everything like that. And if God forbid you got flagged and people tried to PvP you, and then those gates opened up, and this horde of jackal-headed, anubsafe humanoid creatures pouring out of there. I remember going into Silithus before the AQ stuff was there, and how different Silithus was compared to how it is now. And seeing one of those Anubsafe style elite mobs wandering around, just wandering around. And he's not there anymore. He wasn't there after the AQ gates whole thing was opening up. I can never get that back again. I could go to a vanilla server and see old Silithus on a patch before AQ20 and AQ40, be like, yep, this is the Silithus that I remember. But it will mean less because it's just a repeat, really. And I mean, it's a nice place to visit, but do you want to stay there? And I think the biggest people that are drawn to these servers are the ones who don't like the modern state of WoW and only like those expansions. And the people who are like, I've never got to experience the pre-Cata WoW. This is my chance of doing it. But if you never did that at the time when it was live, and you're a Wrath Baby or a Cata and forward initial player, you're going to go back to a vanilla server or a TBC server, and I'm pretty sure in just a few days you're going to be like, oh my god, this is awful. You're going to miss LFG. You're going to miss the fact that you're going to be bothered by the fact that you have to wait until 40 to get your first mount, and it's slow as dirt. The 60 epic mount is expensive as hell. Flying, it'll be, flying, it's a 50-50 thing if you'll miss, but you'll get it in TBC if you go down that route. Flying over old vanilla, pre-Cata vanilla, is a trip. You can look on my channel and you'll see that I have 4 or 5 videos of me exploiting the Druid bug in Wrath and flying around Azeroth and the Eastern Kingdoms as a Druid when I'm not supposed to. And you can see just how lazy the devs were at the time with messed up land and missing textures and the way things just like sheer drop off out of your sight and you were never meant to see. And this, you get to fly over the secret caves like the supposed Zulian Tiger Vendor Cave that was rumored to exist and whatnot. But say you're quested along and everything, when you get to like Jintha Allure and everything's elite, are you going to want to deal with that? The fact that you need to get a group together just to do what you want to do in Jintha Allure? Let me tell you, Jintha Allure was horrible. Hated that. You would want to, if Horde keys for Onyxia, you had to kill each one of those world dragons. Not the nightmare dragons at the portals, but all those world dragons, you had to kill them to get an Onyxia key. At Alliance, you just fucking talk to an Onyxia in Stormwind in human form. TBC, those attunements. Are you going to want to do all of those ridiculously shitty TBC attunements? I did them. I was in Hyjal up to Archimond with my guild. I was halfway through Black Temple. Yeah, I've gone through them. I wear Hand of Adal proudly for having done a whole bunch of that stuff, but I know I can't go back. There's just so many quality of life things like LFG. Not LFR. That one's debatable, but like LFG, think about what that saves. In Vanilla WoW, let's say you needed to do Mordon, okay? Desolus. Do you sit in a capital town and spam for people for Mordon in Org? But then you're not multitasking, so you're wasting your time. So you're sitting there, you're just like looking for tank, Mordon, Mordon, Mordon. Yes, inner Mordon, like inner, outer, purple, green, blue, fuchsia, red, white, whatever. Mordon. Or you could be out in Desolus, questing still, but now you're reaching a different audience. So an org, there's pros and cons to it. You might reach somebody who has an alt that needs the dungeon. But then if you're out in Desolus, you might run into people who are actively questing to get into Mordon and do a quest in there. So it's pros and cons of each. But LFG, you just push the button and you go about your day doing whatever you want to do, and you have the game multitask for you. Now LFR is very, it's 50-50 if people want LFR and think that it ruins the game. But LFG, I think, is an amazing utility and one of the best inventions of modern MMOs ever. And I would hate to go, like, when I started doing Rift back in Kata, it didn't have it initially, but then it did. And LFR still makes a big impact. Like, I was paying a sub for Rift, I was active in Rift, had just gotten into a guild, was just about ready to start raiding in Rift on days when my WoW guild didn't raid, and then LFR dropped. And I was like, oh, you mean all my tunes that aren't part of my own raid team and everything like that could get into a raid full-blown and get the tier gear and experience the story and everything? Bye, Rift, sorry. Stop sub, stop playing Rift, and that was it. But for all of the derision as to whether or not LFR is good, LFG, I think, is phenomenal. And I think if you're a modern WoW player, I think you'll miss a great deal of the quality of life to go back to vanilla and TBC. The animations, the graphics are going to be different. You have to decide if enough of what you're regaining from the old stuff counters what's cool about the new stuff. So, what do you guys think? What do you think about expansion locked servers? Your Felmyst, your Nostariuses, your Elysiums. Do you get enough out of those older versions of WoW to really enjoy it? What about add-ons? How easy is it for you guys to find add-ons for those versions? How do you decide what patch in that expansion or content is the best patch? Is it always the last one before the next round went live? Like the last TBC before Wrath, the last vanilla before TBC? Or is it more of a mid one? You know, TBC's landscape changed when SSO dailies came out, and the Isle of QD, and going out there and getting the Sunwell and Magister's Terrace and ship, that changed TBC drastically. Vanilla, I mean, there was what Celithus looked like before AQ20 and 40 existed, and going through the war effort and turning in all of that crap to your faction so that you can get the gate open and everything. Do you launch the server on an early patch and then progressively over months emulate WoW's patches and keep it up to date? So you start on Felmyst and you start with a beginning TBC patch and you're proceeding along, and then the admin says, okay, 4 months have gone by, let's do this patch. 3 months have gone by, let's do this patch. And you work your way up to the final Wrath patch. Do you run the pre-expansion events? Do you run like TBC's pre-Wrath event in there? And eventually you're going to hit a point where you've done everything. So what's going to keep you there? When you have accomplished all your goals and you just keep like, well, I don't have a max level warlock. Let me do a warlock war. All my characters are horde. I've never seen the alliance side. Let me run an alliance side. You will just eventually run out of stuff to do because that game isn't going anywhere. And then if the dev is adding stuff to it, then that's not really the TBC that you know anymore. You know. So what do you guys think? How do you feel about private servers? Do you agree with the comments where people are saying, well, if WoW's going after just the popular ones, it should go after all of them? Do you think Felmyst made a mistake by being so talked about before it went live that this got countered in that? Remember that? What do you guys think? Let me know. You heard my thoughts on it? To me, it would be a nice place. My giant sum up, my TLDR is a nice place to visit. I can't live there. And it's not even really that nice place of a visit because if I wanted to do something that I would want to visit, I'd have to level to get there. If I wanted to check out the world nightmare dragons sitting out in front of their portals, I have to get up to a level where maybe I can get on a mountain, you know, check around and take a look at those things. So that is going to be tedious. I mean, again, my hunter took 23 days. My warlock took 13 days. Nowadays, maybe I would do it in 9 or 10 days of played time, but do I really want to go through all that to just see Tear sitting out in front of his portal again? No, not really. So what do you guys think? That's my 2 cents. Peace out, everybody.